welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we take the movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my friend, co-host, and oxygen destroyer,
Alex Dandino.
That's right. All right, guys. 22 years ago, the universe convulsed in its womb, deep in its nethers.
Did you
to
just
create
say 22?
Did I? Oops.
Did you say 22 years ago?
Slip of the tongue. I'm like a character on Sex and the City. I can't be honest with myself. Here, a man was born. A man who would go on to lead one of the most mediocre lives of all time. But would do just enough that his friends and family would kneel before him every June and bring him movie delights like an old-timey king. And that young, fertile, virile 22-year-old man is me. So this June, the month of my birthday, everyone's bringing me birthday gifts. So today, Alex is up. And Alex brought me one of my favorite movie picks of all time. But before that, business. Everyone, we have more great birthday movies over on our Patreon. Patreon.com/FilmAlchemistPod. We have some great episodes over there that I think you're going to enjoy a lot. Also, it's a great way to help us support the show. It's the very best way to help us grow the show, to make this thing exactly what we think and believe it could be. We have a huge Patreon exclusive library, commentary, miniseries, great community over there. We would love for you guys to join. If you have even $1 a month, man, we would appreciate the support. So thank you for those of you who do support us. Thank you in advance for those who are about to. Go to the YouTube, Film Alchemist. Find us on all the socials, including TikTok. We could use your help on TikTok as well. Appreciate that. The email, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. We're easy to get a hold of. Reach on out. Make sure you're leaving 5-star ratings and reviews everywhere you find the show. Make sure you go subscribe to misfitparade.net so you can see the movies that we're making. Our film, Sugar Tits, is about to make its debut at a festival here in Indianapolis. And then who knows, we might be somewhere where you are and would love to see you out at a film festival. So that's misfitparade.net. And be sure to check out all the video work I'm doing for our friends over at Looper. They have a wonderful team over there that's just setting me up to talk about movies and making awesome killer videos for them. So go check all of that out. We thank you. So Alex,
Griffey,
what did you pick and how did you come to this choice?
Well, it seemed kind of obvious to me, I guess. And what's weird is we haven't done this movie. This has come up a couple of times within the last 2 months of recording. We keep doing movies and we're like, how have we not done this one yet? We're
really cleaning out the back catalog for sure.
Because like when we started the show, it was one of those things. It was like, oh, that one we got to save for like, you know, a really special time.
When we're good and have a huge audience, we're going to need some bullets.
When like people are really into it and really listening to us. So now that we're at the
we'll
tens
do that
of
one
listeners,
from our porch on our Malibu estate. Don't worry.
Yes, from my Tony Stark cave. Now that we have the tens of listeners, though, that we always wanted, I think
massive counts. Yeah,
it was time. No, so I picked 1954's Godzilla.
Gojira,
probably definitely one of your cornerstone movies, one of your DNA films, I think. Right up there with Highlander. And again, it baffles me we haven't done it yet. I feel like we've done other Godzilla movies or around Godzilla, maybe other monster films, but this is the first, like, this is the OG. So
this is the one. Yeah. And it's kind of funny because it's actually a perfect gift to give to me this year. One, I'm at a milestone birthday, but two, this is Godzilla's time, man. Like, this is Godzilla's time. So we have Godzilla vs. Kong, which came out and did very well.
Yep.
Godzilla -1.
Yep.
Arguably one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. Won an actual Academy Award. This is Godzilla's time, right? Apple has a MonsterVerse TV show. It's never been a better time to be a Godzilla fan. So I grew up in the Showa era of Godzilla, I believe is what it's called. So the first one I ever had was I owned a VHS called Godzilla vs. Megalon. right? And so Megalon's kind of a weird beetle that would shoot Nerf balls out of his mouth.
Right.
And then there's Gigan, who has these like scythe hands. He looks super cool, right? And they fought Godzilla, and there was a boy who had a friend who was a robot named Jet Jaguar. And essentially it was like a Texas Tornado tag team match, right? Just these giant dudes fighting in rubber suits. And I could not have loved that tape anymore when I was a boy. I adored everything about Godzilla. The Showa era is very silly. I'm trying to think. There's the Heisei era, the Showa era,
Heisei,
right?
Millennium era.
Yeah, Millennium era is super fun too. But so the Showa era had all these kind of like silly movies that I was obsessed with, right? And again, this is where you see like the gif of Godzilla jumping and dancing or sliding on his tail. Right. It was a real just like, who fucking cares? It's a man in a rubber suit kind of fun and games movie. So that was my introduction point, and I just could not get enough. I would scour the TV guide to see if Turner Classics was ever showing one of the Godzilla movies, and from there I just became obsessed with giant rubber suit monster movies, right? Gojira I actually found a little later, right? I was probably in my teens when I actually found like the OG. Probably like 10 or 11, right? So I was at that younger age, so I'd already seen all these Godzillas, and I was like, wow, I got to see the first one. You were immediately struck watching Gojira how absolutely singular and different it is from the movies to that point that I had collected as Godzilla movies, right? This is, and you go back now as an adult and you watch I think that was another thing that made Godzilla -1 so unique to see this year, in the year of Oppenheimer, right? Is that Godzilla was like, hey, all that shit they didn't show us in Oppenheimer so we could pretend that Cillian Murphy was a good guy. This is what it is. It's fucking horrifying mass destruction. It's wails and agony and children screaming as they're orphaned. People sitting around a radio, their entire lives and world destroyed. That's what Gojira was. Gojira was a real-life response, artistically, to the horrors of the atomic bombs that we needlessly dropped on this country, right? And you see a lot of movies of this era in Japan are just kind of struggling with this almost impossible to quantify horror that has been unleashed on them. Right. And Godzilla becoming just this giant mutated dinosaur monster who is imbued with atomic powers, who our modern weapons can't defeat. Right. It's this perfect, beautiful symbolism for the fucking terror and agony that these people are going through. And then it turns into this kind of like, at the end, it's almost like the great dictator speech, right? This letter to like, hey man, can we all just be fucking humans and stop this atrocity? So Gojira in 1954 is operating on a completely different level than almost any other Godzilla movie we've ever had.
Right. I think that, I mean, if you look at the other movies of the time too, like we were just talking about this. So like 1954 saw, from the American market, Creature from the Black Lagoon,
awesome,
which we've talked about on the show, which was awesome.
Absolutely fucks, yeah.
And then Them, which is the giant ant
I
movie.
love Them. Yes, great.
Which is cool. But neither
we should do a whole like rubber suit monster or claymation monster.
Some suitmation action.
Oh,
none of those movies though do, I think, culturally what Gojira can do, because
I think Them was kind of playing in a similar field, but just never to the level of this.
Right. Well, again, I think this is the other thing about that is, and you hit it on the head, which is the American market particularly can't do that because we're the ones who did it. So the expectation is like, what hath we wrought? It's not like we have to be this the movies that come out of America.
It's Oppenheimer outside after Tower's like, I don't know if they're going to actually use my giant bomb for good. Jeez Louise, cheese and crackers. And you're like,
well, that didn't work out. You're like, did you really
I feel
think that was gonna go that
bamboozled.
way?
It's like, yeah, really? You thought this was going to help? You fucking liar. Oppenheimer is a huge piece of shit. Let's just get that on the record. Neither here nor there.
But I do think it's interesting. This is why I like watching. I think this is why watching foreign films is. I think a lot of people. I'm not. Our listeners don't have that problem, but I do think a lot of people sometimes do not watch movies from that perspective. So when you watch something like Gojira, you have to remember that, dude, this is an entire culture that got absolutely nearly erased by something that was
I think
so
it's
phenomenally
impossible
terrifying.
at the time to imagine devastation on that scale, right? There had been
Exactly.
wars. World War II had been raging. So again, but
Yeah.
it's like tanks and bullets and fires, and I think there's something so apocalyptic about the footage of these nuclear
Very
bombs when
much
you
so.
see them. It's
Absolutely.
it's a thing that hits you on a level in your soul that is almost impossible to quantify, right? And I'm not a fucking scientist to know the difference between like a fucking powder explosion and hydrogen explosion and this.
Doesn't
But
matter.
what it is at a cellular level, we took the building blocks of life and just had them like go out of control and
Yeah.
expand rapid. And there's something every time you see a mushroom cloud or you see the footage of like the shockwave and then the and there's actually this insane documentary on HBO. I think it's called White Light, Black Rain or some version of that, right? And it's just a documentary, like an old documentary about like the fucking horrifying, disastrous fallout. And a lot of people who survived even ended up meeting horrifying deaths due to radiation and poison. Yeah. And it's one of those things. It's such a, you live in a world, right? Here's a society, here's a world, here's the rules. All right, war sucks, but like we know what war is. And in an instant, everything in your natural order is obliterated and changed. The same way that seeing a giant dinosaur crest a hill from the ocean, you'd be like, everything I knew and believe is changed. Over now. Like everything from this moment cannot be the same. And this movie captures the fucking absolute existential dread of this moment.
Absolutely. I mean, in that moment, the moment in the movie when he's like, when you just like that moment in the movie where you just see Gojira's head pop over the hill.
Yeah.
When they like, I saw it, and they all run up the hill, and you just see it briefly. You're like, watching it in the movie, I gotta tell you, it was like this fascinating thing. You're like, holy shit, like, imagine that happening. Like, there's the time before that moment, and then everything after. Like, you are,
yeah. And this isn't like
you are molecularly changed.
Yeah, this isn't a lot of like the Harryhausen or that famous Twilight Zone where it's like we flew back in time. This is it's right here, right where you live. And even something like them, right? It's ants, and everyone's like, all right, I've seen an ant.
Sure.
Like there are fucking adults right now that don't believe dinosaurs existed because it doesn't jive with the Bible.
Right.
And it's like, so imagine you saw that and you turn around, you're like, fucking dinosaur, and they're like, yeah, right. Yeah, right. TikToker, get the fuck out. Yeah. It's but it's the other thing I was kind of struck by today. The Godzilla imagery in this movie is so fascinating too. I was like, that scene you're talking about, that Godzilla puppet looks like dog shit. Like has like horrible like thing you would win at like Chuck E. Cheese kind of like poorly painted on eyes.
It looks like a hand puppet.
It looks like dog shit.
Yeah.
And there are moments in this movie where they go to that puppet and it looks fucking egregiously bad. But then what you realize is the moments they cut back to like Godzilla in the bigger rubber suit, the moments where I think the Godzilla imagery, because you think now, and it's hard to imagine a time when Godzilla was not absolutely saturating the pop culture.
Yeah. Right.
It's hard to imagine seeing Godzilla for the first time again at this point. I was even thinking about that during the credits. You hear that amazing fucking score. Like one of the greatest scores. Pretty
sweet.
It's fucking rad. But you're hearing that, and you're hearing Godzilla roar, the iconic, and all that's happening over black. And I was like, imagine a time when people didn't have a context for those two sounds. Now you hear either one of those, and you immediately have like 1,000 pictures of Godzilla in your mind.
Right.
No one fucking knew. And so this movie, had they not nailed the imagery, and I think the scenes at night, when you see Godzilla stomping through the city, and you see the city on fire, right? And you see Godzilla as this shadowy monster. The shadows help out the suit and puppet in this a lot. But that first one's in like broad-ass daylight. Some guy's like, I'll fucking feed you and my cows to Godzilla. Oh, there he is. And you're just like, oh, there he is.
Yeah.
And then it gets better. But again, it's hard to imagine. Imagine a world where that puppet was so shit that everyone's like, ew, Godzilla, we're out. And we don't get like 40 more movies.
Well, I mean, like, that's the craziest thing. That's the crazier thing, too, is there's almost this expectation of, again, there's just an entire generation of kids who have no concept. Like, I think maybe your children are the only ones who, at this point, have the concept of, like, oh, there's different iterations of Godzilla. But, like, there's an entire, my kid wanted to go see Godzilla Kong the New Empire in theater.
And he should. Like, it's fucking rad.
That's the reason. But that's, like, the Godzilla he'll know.
Your kid is at the perfect, like, these are, like, giant action figure movies.
Oh my god! Yeah,
I forgot to mention his name because I'm bad with names. Akira Ifukube is the composer of that original score. I would have been ashamed of myself if I didn't actually put respect on the name. I might not have because I might have pronounced it horribly. But I mean, one of the greatest.
The attempt that counts, Griff.
One of the greatest scores. Iconic,
it is really good.
Iconic movie score. But,
I agree.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool thing about Godzilla now is there's so many different. So like your sons and mine have giant punch. Even watch like the legendary monster era or whatever this one is. You have the first Godzilla's trying to make a real Godzilla movie, and in a way it feels like it's almost like, are they going for like a 9/11 thing? What are they doing? Okay, kind of. Skull Island, you're like, all right, we're doing like a fun non-genre piece, and after that, it's like now we're just doing cartoons.
Yeah.
And by the new one, it is straight up like a Power Rangers episode, which is fucking fine. But again, I think it's interesting to go back to the origins of this and see that potency, right? Seeing, I love the scenes after the first one where they have all these like shelters where people are bunkered up crying, right? There's a little girl just crying over what is a mother who's died.
Yeah.
Right? They're starving people and they're bringing people in on stretchers and, people standing in the fucking hollowed out, burnt rubble that's left of their city, right? And there were moments where we just sit and, like, the radio will be playing, like a newscast, and we just take in actual scenes of devastation. Like, real, truly, humanly devastating moments of these orphans and these mothers who have lost children. And in this city, it's like, God, that was our whole fucking life is now burnt to the fucking ground. Because Americans won't stop testing or dropping bombs on us. And you watch this, I think some of those scenes are the absolute wildest and most effective moments in this movie that most Godzilla movies have never been able to replicate. Almost every other Godzilla movie after this one, I feel like they don't put a lot of the time into the sit and be devastated. Godzilla -1 definitely plays in this arena, but it's never been as good as this moment.
Well, you and I have talked about this when we go see the American Godzilla movies, which is there's so much like focus on the human element. You're like, who cares about these people? I just want to see Godzilla. And that functions twofold. One is because Godzilla is awesome and I want to see Godzilla. The other thing is like the story, the human element is so boring that I don't care about what happens to these people. This experience.
It's an eternal Godzilla issue.
But watching Gojira, I was actually like, this is actually worth this. And I think, again, it's because of the cultural thing. Like, this is a metaphor for American colonization, American devastation,
American carnage. Yeah.
And so we're watching this. You're like, I am very engaged in the human story here because, on some level, you should feel some form of guilt about being an American in that way. Like, I'm not saying everyone has to, but it is like that sort of like vibe. It's really fascinating.
Well, it feels like we did this whole like trial at Nuremberg. Like, here are all these human crimes that the Nazis committed, crimes against humanity. You're like,
right.
Yep, fuck those guys. That's true. They committed crimes against humanity. You're like, it feels like we did too. Like, it feels like those bombs were a crime against humanity.
Sure, absolutely.
And so it is. It's. And again, this one, a lot of the characters are like people who are like, I'm in love, or I got to stop Godzilla. And you're just like, God, all right, enough of these humans, right? And you skip through. This one, essentially at its core, we're watching people whose lives have been completely obliterated and changed. We're watching a feckless government who's like, how the fuck do we deal with something like this? Which, based on the reality of the film, is engaging enough, but the real core of it is this kind of battle between the two Oppenheimers, right? Inside every scientist, there live 2 Oppenheimers. And whichever one you feed the most grows. So we have our kind of like nice old man, right? Legendary actor Takashi Shimura, right?
Yep.
Fucking absolute legend. He's doing this. We disrupted its habitat. We created it. He goes, this is a priceless specimen. We can learn from this creature. Why are we destroying this? Like almost mourning the destruction of Godzilla. This is very much the Christopher Nolan Oppenheimer. Like, it's just pure pursuit of knowledge. It's science. If I don't do it, someone's going to do it, and I want to be famous and bang Florence Pugh. And you're like, yeah, all right, I can follow that logic train. Like, I don't accept on any level that he was so fucking naive and delusional that he thought it would end war and help the world somehow. Like, that's the stupid part of that movie.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have like our classic black hat or black eye patches that where he's like, I have created the oxygen destroyer. Essentially this thing that turns aquatic life into skeletons. And that's how we can kill Godzilla, right? He's immune to bullets and lasers.
That's Akihito Harada, right?
Yeah.
The guy who plays
Serizawa. He's immune to everything except for like this oxygen. It just evaporates him, right? In a weird way, using their own version of Oppenheimer's bomb, right? This new and unexplored technology.
Right.
And so he knows what he's created and how fucking devastating and evil it is. To the point where at the end of the film, when he goes down with his kind of begrudging friend to set off the bomb, he stays down there with the bomb. He's like, I've destroyed all the evidence. The only way to make sure this isn't replicated is I will destroy myself. So you're like, it's putting this like nice nobility spin on the Oppenheimer monster.
Well, and that's like, the Oppenheimer allegory would be he would like Doctor Strangelove the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're like, yeah, okay, cool. So
yeah. I'll do this once because I think I need to, but I don't want this to be a thing. No, Oppenheimer, all he did was he's like, hey, we shouldn't do hydrogen bombs so that my bomb will still be the coolest. You're like, all right, great. Fuck off. Sorry, Oppenheimer really, like that fucking guy, I hate that man. Like, hate and despise him with the passion.
It is weird the reaction that you have to that. The reaction, not you, but like the reaction you would have to Oppenheimer is not like this, like, wow, what a great scientist. Like, what a dick. Like,
he is directly responsible for one of the worst moments in human history.
Yeah.
And we're just like, well, he said that cool quote that showed that he had remorse. You're
but
like,
it's not
him.
even it's not even his quote. It's from fucking Siddhartha. Like it's not
right.
Like,
well, he re-quoted a famous quote, and he's like, "I get it."
Quoted a famous book, and we're like,
I get it.
Wow, it's
he watched the bomb, and he's
cause...
just like, "I get what I've done, and that stinks, and I'm sorry." Yeah, fuck him. The entire second half of Oppenheimer is unwatchable because I don't give a fuck about his clearance. He's a piece of shit. He's an absolute piece of shit. We should have left him in that shanty town in the desert and never talked to him again. Fuck that guy. Fuck him. I don't understand. I don't understand the Oppenheimer love. The movie itself is wonderfully crafted.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm saying as the man, the movie is good.
Are there people who are like, Oppenheimer's the coolest?
Yeah, for sure. There are people that misunderstood. Like, he did what he had to do. It was us or them. And you're like, no, it wasn't.
Nope. I'm not
we
doing
didn't.
that.
We never had any logical good reason to drop a bomb on those Japanese people. And I don't know. Maybe it's because I grew up as a Godzilla boy. That I just take the side of we shouldn't fucking commit war crimes.
See, I think but see, this is the cool thing about this movie is you watched movies like this, and rather than them just be, look, for our kids, like you were saying, for our kids, they are these huge action figure set pieces, which is cool.
That's how I came to it too, to be fair.
Of course.
Right? I think that's your entry point.
Yeah, that's your entry point. As soon as you get a little older, you start to realize what the actual allegory is for all the Godzillas, and you're like, oh shit, okay, cool. Like, it's not anti-American, it's just anti-death. Like, it's really fascinating, actually. And that's why I liked, like, that's why I think the human characters in this movie are actually worth watching. Like, Gojira has worthwhile human characters because all of them are grappling with the fact, like, what do we do? This animal is unkillable. How do we save ourselves?
Yeah, it's the Jurassic Park thing, right? When I was a boy, I saw T-Rex and Velociraptor. As a man, I see human monsters.
Yeah.
Who just cannot stop pursuing. Again, who did Nedry have on his computer? Oppenheimer. Neither here nor there, right?
Fuck that guy.
These humans that cannot stop pursuit.
Yeah.
Even if it means everything will be fucking destroyed. And that becomes kind of the interesting part of this. And again, later Godzilla movies start to kind of just veer towards we have to beat Godzilla. We have to beat Godzilla, or Godzilla's fighting another monster and we want one of them to win. Or eventually Godzilla's working with us. Eventually he's fighting Kong. So you start to lose that grappling, right? Godzilla's role becomes much more set in stone as either good guy or bad guy.
Right.
Whereas in this movie, Godzilla is just a simple, abhorrent fact of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what we see is that in grappling with what to do with Godzilla, right? Save him and study him, weaponize him, destroy him. It's the exact debate the world was having about the nuclear bomb. Yeah. And so there is just a level of kind of pathos that none of the other movies come close to. Again, I think that's why everyone loved -1, is -1 had a very specific vision to kind of play as a companion to Gojira, right? And not all of the new ones. Because that is about, a kamikaze pilot who's cowardly and makes it back, and everyone's like, why didn't you die? And the city's fucking destroyed a bunch, and this kind of makeshift family of it's such a fucking great movie. But again, what makes it instantly, you're like, that's top 5 Godzilla movie, no doubt about it, not even close. The human element of it, and him struggling with his own cowardice in the face of war, and now Godzilla becomes the face of war. You're like, that always is when Godzilla will be at his absolute best, is when the teeth and the scales and the fire breath are a symbolism for an enormous, terrifying threat that our real world faces.
Yeah. I think that's, and I think this is the harder part about, again, I don't mean to keep harping on this, but this is the harder part about American Godzilla stories. And I think this is especially in post 9/11 era, it's very difficult to not.
2014 was trying to kind of get after some of that.
The one that we saw in that one with Aaron Taylor Johnson, the 2014 Godzilla tried. Yeah,
that one was trying to make like an actual like true to Godzilla kind of setup.
Yeah, there was an attempt,
and then after that they said people just want the dinosaur. What are we doing?
What are we even doing? But yeah,
like Godzilla 98 is probably like the most American interpretation of Godzilla.
Yeah,
I mean, that's probably like even at the end when it's like it's full of little Godzillas as if we're afraid that something from Japan would come over and it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're like, what's that doing?
The level of like
you go to get a footlong at the Knicks game and all of a sudden it's like seaweed squares and we're like, this is not right.
I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, like if you watch, like when you're young, you're just watching a Godzilla and you're like, okay, cool. But like as soon as you're older and you watch that movie and you're like, this movie is super jingoist. Like there's something about it that makes me uncomfortable about how like, oh no.
We should do giant monsters for every commentary for the rest of the year. I really want to do Frankenstein Conquers the World. War of the Gargantuan rules. But I would absolutely, just as an experiment in art, do Godzilla 98. Because here becomes the question. Can you make a hearty defense of that movie?
I would. All right.
This was my argument when we remade Ghost in the Shell with Scarlett Johansson. Is I said the problem with that movie is that they didn't make it American enough. Right? Why are we above buildings with, like, koi fish and shit? That should be, like, Hooters waitresses.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And, like, Kentucky Fried Chicken tanks.
We bought the rights to make this movie. We're going to make a goddamn American Ghost in the Shell. And we're going to put our consumerism and all that right on Front Street. The fact that they did this, we really want White Lady in it, but we'll keep all of the Asian aesthetic. You're like, that's the problem. Right? That's the like if that was happening in St. Louis, you know what I mean?
Sure.
That movie's great, probably. I don't know. That's probably not the biggest problem with that movie, if we're being honest.
It's definitely not the biggest problem with that movie. I do think that, but yeah, I think
like,
Godzilla
what if the
98,
ghost is like she's fighting and trying to do an assassination as she falls down and her camouflage armor is like glitting in and out, like right behind her is like a Victoria's Secret billboard. So as she falls and goes invisible, her tits match up perfectly with the billboard. You're like, yes, that is Americanized Ghost in the Shell.
Sure.
Now we're watching that movie.
just like our fear of, just like Godzilla 98's fear of foreigners, which is very clear. It's weird. Like, again,
I would
it's
have
such
to rewatch it. I just remember being like, this spawned a cartoon?
It is pervasive. Like I can't remember the last time I watched it, but I remember being like,
I was like, are there even any foreign people in that movie besides Leon the professional?
I can't remember. But
Because
like,
he's a
again,
soldier, but like he's French, so that's why like American
so-
journalists can run with him.
It's so weird. Like, it's just such a straight. We should do a commentary for it.
We should probably do that movie.
But again, because
I would. By the way, when that came out, I was ecstatic. That was my first in theater Godzilla movie.
I mean, that's awesome. It's the first time you got to see Puff Daddy and Jimmy Page do a song together, which isn't great now.
Yeah, his history diddied Godzilla '98.
Yeah, Diddy did it himself.
What song did he? Wasn't it Kashmir?
Yeah,
he just like totally forced himself upon the song Kashmir.
Yeah, he forced himself upon Kashmir and just rapped over it.
God, talk about the real monster in New York City we should have been worried about. Yeah, just Diddy's over there like, no, don't look behind my curtains. That's a monster. And it's like, no,
no, that's
it's
monster.
him.
No,
Yeah,
it's
ew,
you.
Stop, no.
You.
Yeah, no, it's you. I think it's
one
you.
and,
no, look at the
that one-
dinosaur.
This Godzilla soundtrack had that one, and then the other one was the Wallflowers cover of Heroes by David Bowie.
So a lot of crimes were happening in that movie.
A lot of crimes are committed in Godzilla 98.
I'm
Chief
looking
of
this
which-
up right now. The Godzilla '98 soundtrack. Ooh,
Okay,
all right.
we're trying to talk about this.
Rage Against the Machine, Macy's Brain Stew. Why is that on there? Let's see. I mean, these are mostly just
can't
happy
believe we're doing this right now.
bullshit. Silverchair, Fuel,
Yeah.
Ben
No,
Folds. Yeah,
it's the
Come
cla-
With Me, Diddy and Jimmy Page. That's a bummer.
Did
And that song was dog shit. Like, that song was fucking dog shit. Yeah, Heroes by the Wallflowers. No Shelter, Rage Against the Machine. Foo Fighters. Okay, that's a weird soundtrack. I will say this. The reason I paused to look it up is because there's so many movies in this late 90s, early 2000s that are fucking abysmal. Like, you cannot watch them on an artistic level. But they have banger, like, weirdly
Great
awesome soundtracks. Maybe because that's the era we were young people, so we like those shitty songs. But there are some really weird ones that just have good soundtracks for no reason. So I do like to look it up.
I do too. But I digress. Gojira has, like we said, great score, but also, again, it's just a different perspective than what we've been dealing. Like, again, we live in a very post 9/11, like the echoes of that never have gone away. And I think when American Godzilla is made, a lot of the times is made with the guise of, oh, everyone will understand this allegory because it's this allegory. We never have had to deal with that from another perspective, and this perspective particularly, which is a lot more horrifying. Look, I'm sorry, I'm not to equate disasters, but like, it is just one of those things where you're like, holy shit, like, we did not like, you just don't consider it. So when you watch it and when you're older and you really consider the allegory that it's stating, it's kind of devastating. It's devastating in a way that I don't think anybody necessarily is prepared for.
Yeah, you never want to imagine that you or other humans that you like or a part of, a group you're a part of, a country you're a part of, are the monsters.
Right.
And it's unequivocally true that we were the monsters in that moment. Right? I know you make the argument that war is all hell and this and that. It's fucking rough, dude. It's brutal. It's scary. It's
Well, it's also,
and again, so it gets back to the point, right? There's just this, like these moments in the movie where the mother's squeezing her children.
yeah.
And she's just like, we'll be with daddy soon. And then we watch the flames engulf everything. And we watch the city of fire as Godzilla walks through. It no longer matters
Right.
who's who. What matters is that what we as humans have never been able to stop doing is fucking destroying and hurting other humans.
Right.
And so,
I mean,
at some level, whether it's us or Germany or any fucking country that's committed these fucking ancient Rome, Genghis Khan, all these people that have committed atrocities, what it is that Godzilla is right beneath that surface within all of us. And so, even taking out the kind of geopolitical stuff, it just fucking works universally.
Well, I think the other part of it too is Godzilla is an aimless destructor. Like it's not like it's not like he has a purpose for destroying things. He's just destroying things. Like that is the true fear of anybody, is that there is this horrible thing that will happen. Something like that, like some sort of devastation will occur that has no logic to it. It just destroys. That's more terrifying than anything.
Yeah, well, they talk about it, the oxygen destroyer. He's sitting there and he's saying, he's hiding this. And they're like, dude, you have a way to stop. And he goes, what if my shit is used for evil? And he's like, politicians aren't going to sit by and let the world around them keep building up. And boy, he's like, they're going to make this a weapon. His exact quote is that, I don't want to add another terrible weapon to our world. He goes on to say, human beings are weak creatures. And he's sitting there in his office as his country is being devastated. His countrymen are being murdered. Cities are razed to the ground. And his first thought is, I wish I had never invented the oxygen destroyer, right? Even though it, as we see, is the only weapon that can defeat Godzilla, his thought is, he's like, I wish I had never invented this because there's no way this gets better, right? His idea is that the oxygen destroyer will become a monster worse than Godzilla, right? Be careful when hunting monsters, lest ye become a monster yourself. And it's so fucking true. It's so true. Like, even in the franchise, they can't help themselves. Yeah. Eventually, Godzilla becomes a good guy who helps us fight off aliens. Like, so even the movies, they just, eventually you have a cool toy, you're gonna fucking use it. Maybe when you shouldn't. Right? Like, how many Godzilla movies do we watch? I know a lot of superhero movies got shit on for this. They would call it disaster porn, right? Like, Man of Steel comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, just these cities crushing. You're like, how many fucking millions of people died in that scene?
Yeah.
That we just didn't see.
Well,
a lot of the Godzilla franchise is the exact same fucking thing.
Absolutely.
Like, what is the actual death toll of people who have Godzilla killed in this franchise? I bet it would be a fucking staggering pile of bodies. But it doesn't matter, because eventually he's our friend who's fighting an amoeba from space. And you're like, all right, that's fine. And so it's just the universal truisms of the movie. Like, even, for example, one of my favorite moments at the end when they're going down to fucking kill Godzilla in the ocean, right? So we're going to his habitat. The score for that moment is so beautiful because it just plays as almost this melodic nature score.
Yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
Look at the wild Godzilla sleeping, slumbering in his underwater bed. He's just doing what animals do. Right? And he's just peaceful. Yeah. He's not doing shit. And then they come down and start flashing the fucking light at him. And they lure him out so that he can then be fucking destroyed and crushed by the oxygen destroyer.
Right.
And it is this moment of, one of the moments where we just see Godzilla truly in this film is just an animal. He's just a creature. He's not taking bloody revenge. He's a creature who is drawn by light, and then we shoot at him and he defends himself, right? So even in that moment, there's here is nature at peace. Humans are coming to fuck things up. And nature has to lose against our science, right? He's just down there fucking chilling, right? Yeah. We created him with our science. We have to destroy him with our science. And here is this, I mean, we don't know. At one point, they're like, he comes from like an underwater pocket. There could be a whole underwater world. This beautiful natural phenomenon. And we fucked it up. We mutated it. We made it unbearable. We made it monstrous and deadly. And that's just the way it always goes. And so that moment with the score and them slowly walking through the ocean, I was like, I think that slow pause that reminds us that we're the monsters, not Godzilla.
Yeah.
Or at least that we are directly responsible for the monster that did all this. I think it's just like such a beautiful insight at the moment to drive home this point that we keep fucking coming back to, that this movie was a response to a real life Godzilla level event. Right. And to stop and say, it's the classic, like, yeah, it's not that one weapon that did it, right? It's all of the people behind it that, like, that's where the money is. They keep fucking pushing and won't fucking stop.
Right.
And weirdly, we get a moment to pause with nature and to pause with a scientist who's like, yeah, I don't want to do that to the world. Two things that we almost never do.
Two things that don't come often enough.
Yeah. It's just beautiful, man.
It's a really, for a movie that is an hour and a half of, like, kind of like probably I'm not saying the original monster movie, one of like one of the progenitors of like a major devastation monster movie. There's a lot of pathos going on, and a lot of things that I don't think until you're older you really are paying attention to. And I think that's the deceptively powerful thing about Gojira, is that it's the rewatchability of it is beyond reproach.
Yeah, and this moment of like kind of mournful introspection at the end as he's dying, and they're broadcasting it like Godzilla's dead. And the scientist just like, man, I can't believe Godzilla's the last of his species. I can't believe that. And then he just goes on to like, if nuclear testing continues, another Godzilla may appear.
Yeah.
Right? And if not this dinosaur creature, another. There will always be a bigger weapon somewhere down the road. And it's just this beautiful kind of meditation on, you know, the doctor said this in some episode, and I'm sure somewhere else, it's, you know, violence is just this never-ending circle. That violence can only beget more violence, right? It's the eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. And it's just a fucking lesson that we all hear, and we're like, yep, makes perfect sense. And we as a species cannot fucking stop ourselves from doing harm, doing damage, creating carnage and mayhem. We cannot learn the fucking lesson. And I think it becomes this universal fear of how long is it until the world fucking forces us to learn the lesson?
How long is it until Mother Nature says, you know what? I am tired of you guys trying to figure this out on your own. Because the world does have a self-correcting mechanism.
And yeah, Godzilla taking this form of a man-made apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's just, again, I don't think Gojira is not the Godzilla movie I reach for most often.
Sure.
I do think at an artistic level, none of them have come close to achieving what this movie achieved. Because we talked about, there were a lot of rubber suit science fiction monster movies.
Yeah.
There were even a couple the year this came out, right? What made
Landmark
this one different, right? That it spawned this like 40 movie franchise. What made this one different that Godzilla became so iconic? And you can say it's the roar, the look, the powers, the score. Sure, I get all that.
Yeah.
You could say the way that he went and essentially made a bunch of like pro wrestling buddy movies so that kids my age found it too. And then their parents remembered they liked it. Okay. Right. The fact that he had cartoons and merchandise and sure, all of that stuff has gone in to make Godzilla a true titan in pop culture. But again, in the same way that King Kong represented nature's revolt,
Yeah.
I think Godzilla represents, if not even nature, science's revolt, right?
Yeah.
They have these extra meanings. So to us, while we see them as toys and we get squishmallows of Godzilla for our babies and, you know, all this shit, it's kind of like the Freddy Krueger thing, right? Like you can buy a plushie for your kid of Freddy Krueger at Target, even though he's a child rapist and murderer, right? Eventually we just like them and we don't care the bad shit they did.
Right.
Godzilla might be all of that now, a merchandisable cartoon character. Somewhere, though, we all remember what he truly is and what he really represents. Right. That's what makes this different and better than its peers.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's like the high water mark.
Yeah.
And created a genre.
I agree. I think there's a lot to be said for what the transcendental nature of, like, the transcendental nature of Godzilla is that he can represent so many things across so many different cultures. But what really resonates is it's like nature's reaction to man-made science, to science. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, again, like I don't think it's, I I like science. I think science is important. Otherwise, we don't know what the hell.
We grew up with Bill Nye too. We like science.
Bill Nye seems to know what's going on. Like the Earth will be here. The Earth will be fine.
Yeah.
Like whenever anyone talks about like global warming and stuff like that, I'm like, the Earth will be here.
The Earth
It's
gonna be
us
fine.
that will. It's us that will go away because we
seem to
fucked
forget
up,
how many mass extinctions there have been. Like we're gonna be one of them someday. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
So stop fucking making it happen faster.
Yeah, let's not speed it up. And but again, like that's the allegory of Godzilla is just like nature's reaction to us trying to expedite our extinction.
Yeah, it's a true karmic consequence given awesome rubber suited form.
Oh yeah.
That's it for Godzilla. That's it for my birthday. Yay. What a great month. Thank you guys. I have had such a blast with these films. I hope you have too. It stinks getting old, but it's better with good people. So thank you. Make sure you go to patreon.com/filmalchemistpod to see our commentary on Hell Comes to Frogtown and our Patreon exclusive episode this month so that you can follow all of the birthday shenanigans, all of the good stuff. We appreciate it. Make sure you go to YouTube, subscribe there. Subscribe on all the social media channels. Follow, share, especially on TikTok. That means the world to us. Make sure you leave 5-star ratings and reviews. The email, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Make sure you go subscribe to misfitparade.net so you can see the movies we're making. Make sure you check out my video work over at Looper. You can find me posting about that online as well. That's a lot of shit. We'll be back next month with special guest host for the month doing a curation. The pod gets a new face.
Much obliged, Carmelita.
Yeah, a series of wonderful movies with our friend Carmelita Valdez McCoy. You're going to love it. We are already beginning the uphill trek towards the October Mega Marathon. Things are happening here at the Film Alchemist Pod. So help us keep this train on the tracks, guys. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.